I think it's also a very empowering thing for someone with a disability to be able to maybe use some of their funds that they are getting to save for themselves.
Hello and welcome to Forever Home for our kids with disabilities. I'm Valerie, mum to two with disabilities, one visible, one invisible. I'm a life coach and an author. This space has been created to help you navigate the journey of creating a secure, sustainable forever home for your child. We'll chat with parents on this path, realtors, financial planners, and other experts who can make the process easier. Why am I so passionate about this? Because seeing my eldest thrive living independent of us was a gift I didn't always know I could give. I want you to have the opportunity to explore giving that gift to your child. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. So glad you've joined us. We're so appreciative of you tuning in, and we really are grateful that you share these episodes with those who need to hear them. So thank you. We are concluding this series of episodes that we've recorded with Gordon VanderLeek, who is the founder of VanderLeek Law, estate planning lawyer, disability advocate, and dad to 5 adopted children, 3 with long-term disabilities. In the fall of 2009, Gordon's law firm established a division called Disability Advocates, which is led by his wife, Annie. Gordon and Annie started the We Advocate podcast in the fall of 2025, and Gordon is the host of the podcast Estates Made Simple, which was launched in 2023. In part 1, season 2, episode 19, we talked about his journey as a special needs dad, how his firm has evolved, and RDSPs known as Able Accounts in the US. In part 2, season 2, episode 21, we went beyond just put the house in the child's name and examined the structural and governance considerations behind securing a forever home. Last month, Gordon's wife Annie joined us to talk about the Canadian Disability Tax Credit, season 2, episode number 23. Today we have Gordon back with us and his wife Annie to wrap up this conversation, the one that they shared about how the DTC, Disability Tax Credit, is a gateway benefit. Welcome back, Gordon and Annie.
Well, thank you for having us back.
You both said that the real importance of the DTC isn't the tax credit itself, but what it unlocks. So can you explain why it has become such a powerful gateway to other federal supports?
Yeah, again, thank you for having us back. And I think this is a great topic to start off this conversation, and something that I see regularly in the practice. And it sometimes goes this way, is my disabled child doesn't make any money. If they're purely on government supports, they're not even paying taxes, at least here in Canada, right? Because the income levels are so low. In terms of what they receive from the government, it's not creating a tax problem. So the problem is that if you look at just the word itself, it's a credit against tax. If I'm not paying tax, I don't have to worry about a credit. Mm-hmm. And I guess the message here, that's a false analysis, right? That's a wrong analysis because of the policy decisions of the federal government. And the federal government has said, listen, we want to help all Canadians who struggle with a long-term disability. And there is a good number that are in that situation. So what they've done over the years have established different support programs. And again, as we said in the last episode, this is to be distinguished from provincially based programs that might be available for the same person because they happen to reside in a particular province or territory. So I guess the analogy of somebody's in the States would be, okay, what are the state supports and then what are federal supports? What is Washington offering versus what your local state is offering? But in Canada, there are a couple of big ones and then a bunch of smaller ones where it makes a difference beyond just the credit itself. Let's not minimize the fact that if you get that credit, year after year, you're saving on taxes. So nothing wrong with that. You're eligible. If you meet the eligibility requirements, the government says you get a credit, much like the government wants to encourage supporting charities. So
Yeah.
if you donate money to a charity, then you get a tax credit. And then when you are calculating the amount of tax you have to pay, you can take off of that a credit that you've earned because you've given some money to the charity in that calendar year. And why do they do it? It's because of policy. They want to encourage people to support charitable organizations. And so you make donations to those organizations and you get rewarded with this credit. So the problem is that's a donation credit and this is a disability tax credit. So you kind of lump it in. Oh, it's just a credit against taxes. So let's break it down. The two big ones I'm going to point to are the Registered Disability Savings Plan and the new Canada Disability Benefit. And we alluded to that in the last episode. So let's focus on the Registered Disability Plan as being around for the longest amount of time. That was introduced in 2008, and Canada was the first country that got into the establishing a savings program for a disabled person. And really what it represents is the advent of, I guess, this federal policy, which looking at it from an estate plan or from a support perspective of a disabled person or from an estate planning perspective allows a disabled Canadian to build wealth. And it's an opportunity that if you qualify for the Registered Disability Savings Plan, you can put money in and the government will match. And I think in another episode, we got into the details of that. So this is not to get into the details of the RDSP or Registered Disability Savings Plan, but just to say a key criteria, and there are a number, but a key criteria of eligibility is eligibility for the disability tax credit. The government, again, from a policy perspective, says we want to help Canadians save money for their later years. And so we're going to set up this savings plan. And we're going to help because we're going to put some money in addition to what a parent or the person themselves is going to put in. So there can be both a grant and a bond that you become eligible to, and up to $90,000, $70,000 for a grant and $20,000 for a bond. So that's a significant amount of money if placed into the Registered Disability Savings Plan, and if it grows over time, can really amass to a large amount of money, and that could be an additional area of support for the disabled person. But again, when they said it, they said, okay, those that qualify for the disability tax credit will in fact be eligible to set up a registered disability savings plan. If you don't qualify for the disability tax credit, you don't get an RDSP, you don't get this contribution of $90,000 over time. That's not one lump sum. Go back to the other episode, we talk a little bit about the formula there and how it works. But that makes a huge difference. And what we're seeing is certainly with the Registered Disability Savings Plan that if parents and or the person themselves is putting money into the program at an early age, so when they turn 18 and their income levels are low, then they're able to contribute and put money in, that it can grow to a very significant amount of money in their later years. You can start pulling the money out the year after they turn 59. So it's meant for later years. It's like their pension plan, if you will. Like we would put money in a registered retirement savings plan, or which would turn into a RIF, or in the States, a 401k. Different countries say, listen, you should encourage people to put money away for when they're not working. And that's how you support yourself. So this would be equivalent for a disabled person. So eligibility for the RDSP, it's black and white. You have the disability tax credit, you can get the RDSP. And if you lose the disability tax credit, that has implications as well going forward. They've softened that a little bit to say you don't lose it entirely, whereas you can keep it going. You just can't put any more money in, which will lead to a bit of a planning point a little bit later on. The second big one is the Canada Disability Benefit. So this was recently launched in 2025 and was the federal government's way to address poverty for those who are disabled and unable to support themselves, or perhaps they don't have family members who are able to support them, right? They don't have the means to do that. So they said, we're going to give a little extra. We're in an inflationary time, groceries, housing, everything's more expensive. So here's an extra couple $100 a month to be eligible for that. And so that's another federal program. And surprise, surprise, they said, well, we should do this. This is a good thing. So the politicians in Ottawa said they passed a law that says we're going to enact the Canada Disability Benefit. And they, of course, they had to struggle with, well, who gets it and who doesn't? Can't give it to everybody. You got to determine who gets it. And surprise, surprise, they said those who are eligible for the disability tax credit get this extra $200 a month if you meet all the other criteria. It's more than just one criteria, but no, that's a significant program. So there are some other benefits as well of having this program. If you have a child, there's a child disability benefit. There can be the retroactive tax adjustments that we talked about before, and a few other smaller programs that would tie their eligibility or might open the door if you're able to determine you have the disability tax credit. So I think there's compelling evidence to come to this conclusion. It's a gateway credit. Right?
Yeah.
So think of it as a gateway to all the federal programs that are in place. So even if you don't need it to reduce taxes, which you might, and there might be some very tangible benefits for that. And I think we spoke of that, or you spoke of that in the prior episode, right? Where in your family situation, that is evidence that you were able to get a refund on prior taxes. And that's a story we've heard before. But beyond that, I think the point of this part of the episode is to say, assuming there's no tax benefit, there's no refund, and you're not paying tax, so you're not going to save tax, and your caregiver or parent can't use it. Let's just say that's true in your family situation. I would advocate still get it because you want to get the RDSP. It could be huge. And you can go back up to 10 years for prior contributions with the Registered Disability Savings Plan if you missed out going, because it's been around since 2008. And you're going to go, I just am hearing about this. What's my situation? You can go back up to 10 years. So in that situation, I guess the message would be, yes, saving taxes is fun. Show me a people who goes, I really don't want to save tax. I wish I paid more tax. Says no one. But it can be a great gateway to open the doors for these other programs. And quite frankly, the last thing I'll say, and then Annie, maybe you can comment on it. I think it doesn't hurt to say, if you're applying for some of these other programs, say provincial, to say, and oh, by the way, I've qualified for the disability tax credit. Again, as we said in the other episode, they're all they're separate programs. They have different rules and they're all kind of siloed, right? Yes. But if you're telling the story of, here's a person who struggles and how to describe that, the fact that you became eligible for a federally based program that has criteria that cuts some people off, that has to be significant, it has to be permanent, it can't be transitory. So I think it helps tell the story, or helps you as an advocate if you have become eligible for the disability tax credit, if you're negotiating, you're applying with provincial programs or local municipal programs. It can't hurt. They'll probably have a different criteria, but it can help with storytelling, right? It's evidence of disability, objective, independent evidence of qualification for a program that has a set of rules, and you qualified for that. I don't think it hurts. And there can be a huge amount of benefit. And particularly if I could say, because some would say, well, $200 a month, what's that worth? That doesn't go very far, right? That $2,400 a year. Granted, it's there, but even eligibility, the hope is that this is going to be enhanced over the years, and they may increase these amounts. So if you get eligible now, it may open the door for things down the road. But I think certainly the big one is the Registered Disability Savings Plan. Yeah. If you do the projections, there's a great website, RDSP.com, put on by the Plan Institute out of British Columbia. And last time I checked, there was a calculator on there, which if you plug in, there's the age of the kid, I'm going to put on, I'm going to put in this much, I'll put in $125 a month. My child's age 25, assuming a certain rate of return, what's it going to grow to? It will be into the hundreds of thousands of dollars when that child hits 60, right? It can be a large amount of money. It can be very significant, right? Mm-hmm. So not one you'd want to avoid or ignore. If you're saying, I need to provide financially when I'm not around for my child, for a lot of people, the RDSP is a fundamental building block to that financial security.
Sometimes people hesitate a little bit because they think, well, the person isn't going to get the credit, and we don't really have money to put into this because, again, it's a person with a disability, there's lots of costs. Mm-hmm. But even if you got approved and then the RDSP was set up, if you put nothing in, there was bonds of $20,000, you'll get $1,000 every year free and clear without putting a penny in. So people again, sometimes stop because they say, well, we just don't have anything extra.
Hmm.
So even that gives you a way to have a little bit of money, right? Because I think the challenge is lots of people just don't have a lot of extra to spare, but this is one way to still even get the bonds will come in automatically. So
Yeah.
that's the 20,000 and then maybe you'll have some later on, right? You can always add as you can. I think it's also a very empowering thing for someone with a disability to be able to maybe use some of their funds that they are getting to save for themselves. It is one way where if they're seeing that it's a way for them to save in a way they would not be able to otherwise. So I think that's also very empowering. And one of the things is so in Alberta, what assured income for the severely handicapped is one of the programs that then is an income-based program for someone with a disability. So you have to apply to get that income. One of the things that's happening now is that they are requiring you to apply for the disability tax credit. So it's going to be a not a if you'd like to, it is a you have to because they want to see whether you are going to get the Canada Disability Benefit. They actually then take that amount off. So the federal government gives 200 and AISH gives just $200 less, but they are requiring everybody on AISH now to do that. So it's
Hmm.
sort of something to think through. If your child's getting to that age, you probably want to do that right away so that that part is done.
There are so many families in Alberta that probably are not aware about the tax disability credit. This mom that I know, she was just so overwhelmed with it all. And I don't know that she ever did do it, to be honest. She's unfortunate.
She still can.
Okay.
So, yeah, some of it is very overwhelming sometimes. Like in some ways, people are able to do the different applications that I do, but
Hmm.
sometimes they're overwhelmed. And so sometimes when I'm saying, well, I can do this and this and this to help you, people just let out a sigh going, oh, okay. All I have to do is give you information and you do the rest. And I think that helps a lot because it is sometimes very overwhelming, right?
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But all of that is very overwhelming. People don't
Yes.
necessarily know all that information. And sometimes people don't move forward because it is overwhelming. And so sometimes people are coming in and saying, there's just so many things to do, and I don't understand all the different applications and how this all fits together. And that's the work that I do when somebody hears you mean you do all that? I just have to give you the information. And I say, yeah. And lots of times that's just a relief to somebody because they have so many other things to do, right? A
Yeah.
family that has children with disabilities is overwhelmed already. You
Hmm.
add all of these different applications, it's hard. So it's just one way of helping someone to get the things in place that they need and also have the information about what's even possible.
Yes. Yes. Thank you again. So appreciative of the work that you do, Annie, because it is as a parent, and I know you are a mom to children with disabilities or adults now. So yeah, you're walking it. You've been there, you've done it, and I love the fact that you're turning around to help others on their walk. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So Annie, for families who receive a denial letter, which is kind of boggles my mind. But anyway, for families who do receive a denial letter, what are their actual options and how realistic is it to successfully appeal a disability tax credit decision?
It's definitely appealable. I think lots
Okay.
of the times it is that somebody hasn't done a fulsome application. Like they've
Okay.
done just the disability tax credit. They got someone to send it in without kind of adding anything additional. It's really, really
Mm.
important to add extra documentation along with to help to tell the story because it's just one form. But if you have a backup psych assessment or IPPs, or maybe you've done an application for AISH which was the income-based program. Maybe you've done an application for that. That has a medical component too. So maybe using that documentation along with to help to basically back up. I think sometimes it is that they just don't have enough
Mm.
information. Sometimes you have to go and get some additional. You think, well, I've done the disability tax credit. I should have enough now. Maybe, maybe not, right? Because again, remember, you need to prove that you're markedly or significantly restricted. So
Mm.
how do you actually prove that? How do you because it's looking at daily living. So how is this disability that they have, how does it affect their everyday life, their ability to do different things? And so sometimes the backup information helps to tell that story.
Hmm. Okay. Thank you.
I think that's really important to say Well, and certainly we've seen it. It's hard to say, well, as long as you ask for a decision to be reviewed, of course you're going to get approved. I mean, that's obviously not true. So I want to clarify that up front, just if people's brain are going, oh, I should just, redo it. But I think what you want to ask is, did the story get told well enough?
Mm.
Right. And it could be just, as Annie said, an example would be you didn't have as much supporting information, or you emphasized the wrong things, not understanding what the test is. And it can be tricky. I mean, it's interesting to say that we have said we need to help people with this. And, we started this division saying, well, let's try it. And if the phone stops ringing, we'll shut it down. Right. Well, 16 years has gone by and the phone has not stopped ringing, right? Because I think Annie's found that there's a lot of people who need help with that because they could be a wonderful caregiver, a wonderful parent, but this is specialized. And that's what we've experienced is to say, there's a legal component to understanding the test. But more beyond that, there's a skill of storytelling. So I would say in the appeal process, you have to, drill down and say, let's look at it. So if you got denied, it's probably worth sitting down with somebody and saying, what are my chances? Do we think it's going to be the same result if we go through this again? It could be that a number of years have gone by and the disability has changed, and we just need to tell the story anew with the fresh information. Or there is legitimately a wrong decision and there's a legitimate appeal that could be applied with regard to that. A good number, I think, Annie, of people who've been frustrated with the denial perhaps has been, we just need to tell the story better, that the disability hasn't changed. It's just the person sitting in the cubicle who's reviewed it has the wrong impression of what reality is. So it's not like you're gaming the system or you're trying to get something you're not entitled to. We just see that there's a skill set in storytelling, looking at it from my perspective, because Annie's the one who's doing it, not me. I think it's fundamentally about storytelling. And it's not making up a story, but it's taking your kid, your loved one, and accurately describing what their daily experience is, acknowledging the true extent of the disability. That's the exercise. And in some cases, a parent particularly is always hoping aspirationally for the best for their kid. And it is fundamentally very difficult, I think, for a parent to describe the future of a child in extremely negative terms. But that may be the actual reality of that disability. But it's almost like they can't bring themselves because it's like they're admitting defeat by applying. But the true nature and extent of the disability has to come out in the paperwork, right? And how you're describing it. They may be doing well, but maybe it's because the parents are doing a marvelous job of supporting that child. And that's why they're even making it day to day and having success and having a good quality of life. That's not the true extent and nature of the disability in terms of the restrictions that are there. That if you strip away those supports, what does it actually look like?
Right.
In other words, if the parents suddenly got in a car crash and there's no one else looking after the kid, what would reality be?
Yeah.
Right? That is a very different thing. So sometimes the good work of a parent is both, I don't want to be that candid about what the struggles are because maybe I feel intuitively that's not thinking highly of my child. That's not natural to speak that way about your kid because you hope for the best. We plan for the worst, but you hope for the best. Yeah, Annie, maybe comment on that from terms of some of the experiences you have.
Yeah, I think it's very much being the realistic parent, right? So if you kind of take away the prompting that you do every day and the reminders and everything that you're doing as a parent to make your child succeed, if you took all of those things away, then would the person be able to do it? And would they then be markedly restricted or significantly restricted, right? And oftentimes we don't even realize how much we're helping as a parent. And so then the story really is different than reality sometimes because it looks way better than it actually is. But if you took all of those things away, then what would it look like? And I think that's the challenge sometimes. And when you're going to the doctor, helping the doctor to see that part, that this is what the day normally looks like. And my child wouldn't get out of bed unless I prompted and called 5 times and then laid out the clothes and did all of these things and then made sure that they were on time when they left and made sure that I checked in with them when they got where they were going. And then I made sure that the lunch was made because they would never have remembered to bring the lunch. And it's all of those things that you do that just become a natural sort of thing that just happens in your home because you know that's what your child needs. But that
Yeah.
doesn't show what your child can do, even though they can get out and go wherever they were going. But what happened in between to get them there is what we have to be able to show. But again, I'd spoken before in our last episode about the pain piece. I think if somebody has a great deal of pain and that is what is stopping them from being able to do the activities of life, it's
Hmm.
one of the hardest ones to get a yes for with a disability tax credit. And I've not always been successful in that area because it's hard to then show how it affects because how they're still showing up because they still have to work or they still have to do something in order
Yeah.
to eat. And then that's almost taken as, well, then obviously they can, and there must not be pain because they're able to do it. So I find that pain part of it is a very difficult one to be able to tell the story. So that's one maybe that we try to not get to the actual final appeal process. We try to give more information before, and most of the time we're successful in doing
Yeah.
it that way if we can give more information. I think sometimes in the area of pain that I think if somebody heard the story in person and sees the person and how they deal with pain, then would there be a different outcome? I think that's one
Yeah.
place that maybe we would go more towards the appeal because it's hard to sort of back that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pain is very, very subjective, and I'm just recognizing that with my husband who had back surgery a year ago, actually not quite a year ago, it was last summer, and he's still having pain at the surgical site. And so I hear what you're saying. Like I'm watching him function and hearing him with his verbalization of the pain and just how he moves. It's almost like they need to send in a video clip of
Yep.
somebody trying to function. And then the other thing, as well as you were talking earlier, when my children were little, especially my oldest one, who is total care, I remember someone saying to me, "You have to paint the picture of your worst day ever as if that's every day." And not that it is every day, but you do experience that because they do have those worst days, and you have to paint that picture and get that, as you say, get that across to the people that are making the decisions. And to your point earlier, Gordon, the fact that somebody's sitting in a cubicle checking the boxes as to whether they get a yes or no. So I'm glad that things have changed, Annie. Thank you for telling us that the forms have changed. So it's a little more informative to those persons that are looking at those forms to make those decisions. But it sounds like we still have a little ways to go. So what needs to change?
I think it's difficult. It is a 16-page application. So
Mm,
it's difficult for a doctor because when do they give a doctor time to do that? So I think it's
yeah.
a harder thing for the doctor. I think it's a way better way, though, to tell the story because there's a section in it that does go through different areas of activities and so on and whether they can do it, whether
Mm,
it affects them not at all some of the time or all of the time. That
yes.
helps to show the market restricted in
Yeah.
that just them checking those boxes. It gives a more fulsome picture, but it takes more time for a doctor. So I think that's it's difficult. If there was a way for doctors to have a little more time to do some of those different applications, that would be helpful. But I do think it's vastly improved from what it was before.
Hmm. Thank you. Are there other areas that you think structural changes would make it a little more fair or a more consistent framework? Is there anything else either of you can think of we could implement to make this a more easier process for families to
Yeah.
go through and for the doctors to complete the forms?
I, I'll add to what Annie said, as I said, and I don't know what the rules are, but just an examination of the supports in place for the medical community in completing the form. I think it ends up getting relegated in everything they have to do day to day to the bottom of the list. And I think there's a need for people more resources towards training the professionals and maybe compensating them appropriately for the importance of getting good assessments and because that's difficult. I think in general, what I would add in terms of areas of reform is while it's an appropriate test, I've seen it people across the table from me who go, my kid struggles mightily, but they don't qualify for the disability tax credit, right? I think there's a whole number of Canadians who struggle and would be deserving of support and need support. They don't get it because of the qualification for the disability tax credit.
Right.
So at the same time, I think we want to acknowledge that there have been improvements in the system over time, right? There's some benefits and they've softened the rules a little bit with regard to that. So I think point number one I would make would be to look at broadening the disability tax credit so that it's helping the people who need the help. Because I think there is many, and it's not the odd one. I think there's quite a few Canadians who would really need this program and they can't access all the federal programs just because of the access to the disability tax credit program. The second thing I would say with regard to reforms in the system is I think it almost deserves its own agency or, take it out of the realm of Canada Revenue Agency, right? I mean, this is the taxation authority. So they're good at forms and they're good at understanding tax rules. And presumably the people who are working there get skilled and trained with regard to disabilities. But we see lots of instances where it's clearly like, do you even understand what's going on? I mean, I remember it doesn't happen often, but there was somebody who's, I think they had Down syndrome and they had to reapply after 10 years going, well, what do you think is going to happen for a Down syndrome? It's not going away. It's genetic, but there was a limitation. So and again, it could be well-intended people that are there, but taking it out of the auspices, having it under an agency that is providing supports independently of our taxation authority. I think we'll move it away from saying it's important to say this is the program, this is the department of the federal government that is supporting disabled Canadians, and it's not about the tax credit. Right? I think that will even help on the messaging to say, well, this agency is charged with supporting Canadians, and maybe we get some rules that would have it as a broader application so that we have these programs that get to the people who need them.
Love it.
Shorter phone line waiting time when you're trying to get information about it, right? Like you wait for 45 minutes to get through to somebody. Like sometimes I'm checking on the application to see where it's at and so on. And you wait a very long time and then you get to the person and then it's in a different department. Then they transfer you and then drop the call and you're starting all over again. So to me, the whole waiting and there should be a better way to get the information. And I think that's the problem sometimes when people aren't applying and they haven't talked to somebody and they're trying to get the information through CRA. I think some of your problem is that they are not necessarily helpful in giving you the information needed for you to move forward. And again, so if people are looking for help, trying to get it through Canada Revenue Agency isn't the way to get it.
Okay. All right. Listen up, audience. So thank you so much for coming to conclude this conversation about disability tax credit. I really have appreciated all the insights that you've given us. And it's so helpful, so helpful. So before we conclude our conversation, I ask everybody, what pearls of wisdom, what little bits of advice, what piece of encouragement might you want to share with our audience today?
I'll maybe start, and then it's not to exclude Annie from sharing. But I think maybe the theme of this is kind of a specialized area, right? So you want to get the right professional to assist. But recognize you don't have to do it alone. It could start with saying, talk to somebody, that's in a parent support group or something, like people who have had other experiences. So start to learn, and it's not a journey you have to walk alone. The messaging here is, well, it's more than just a tax credit. So this isn't something you just go to the accountant to say, well, can you apply for me? I think there's a role of saying, okay, get the right tool to fix the job. And in this case, it's like somebody like a disability advocate who understands that disability would be there. But it might start with shared experiences for others in your community, other people who have children of a similar situation. Valerie, you just talked about, here's what you learned through the process. The sharing of this information would be really helpful. So you don't have to do it alone. Get other people to help you and then bring in the right professional, because it can make an enormous difference in the long term in terms of financially supporting for your child and, and integrating that into the estate planning process. So you don't have to do it alone, and get the right professionals to help you that understand the disability.
Thank you.
Well, and I would say just apply. Like it is definitely worth it. If you're not sure, it is still worth it to do an application, because it is something that will help with their child's future as far as being able to have a savings plan. So I would definitely say apply.
Thank you so much, Annie. Thank you so much, Gordon. So appreciate you both taking the time to be here to educate us and to inspire us. And thank you. Yes, do apply. The doors can be open to so many more things. Just apply. All right, audience, live with intention, embrace the journey. Thanks for joining me today on Forever Home for our kids with disabilities. I hope today's episode gave you something new to think about and it increased your confidence on your journey. If you found this episode helpful, do tell others about it. Use the text feature to let me know your questions. Tell me what you want to know. Until next time, take care and keep building your child's future.